Navy SEAL said, "Go home." But all 12 military dogs refused and guarded the fallen soldier instead. At 02:17 hours, the desert air around Forward Operating Base Raven Rock felt heavier than usual. No wind, no stars, just the low mechanical hum of generators and the distant ticking of floodlights rotating along the perimeter fence. Lieutenant Ethan Cole stood on the edge of the tarmac, boots planted in oil-stained concrete, helmet tucked under his arm. His night vision goggles hung unused against his chest. He didn't need them anymore. He could see everything clearly enough. The body lay 20 feet in front of him, a human outline under a poncho liner. Still. Wrong. "Take the dogs back to the kennel," the Navy SEAL beside him said quietly. The SEAL's name was Chief Marcus Hale, 20 years in uniform, voice worn thin by sand and gunfire. He wasn't heartless. He was practical. This was how the military survived loss: contain it, secure it, move on. Ethan nodded once. Then he turned to the handlers. "Recall units," he said. 12 handlers raised their hands. 12 whistles lifted, and nothing happened. No movement, no shifting pause, no obedience. All 12 military working dogs remained exactly where they were, sitting, facing the body, guarding it. Raven Rock was not a base you stumbled upon. It sat beyond a dry mountain ridge in the American Southwest, shielded by natural rock formations and reinforced concrete walls. Satellites saw nothing but heat, shimmer, and shadows. GPS signals bent strangely near its perimeter. Official paperwork called it a joint logistics and testing installation. The men and women stationed there called it something else, where careers disappear. Raven Rock hosted special operations units, intelligence teams, and experimental programs that never made press releases. Everything here was classified at some level. Everything here carried plausible deniability, especially the dogs. The K unit at Raven Rock was not standard. These dogs weren't trained just for patrol or detection. They ran night insertions. They fast-roped from helicopters. They cleared rooms ahead of SEAL teams. They wore cameras. They wore armor. They bled. And one man understood them better than anyone else. Staff Sergeant Daniel Ruiz had arrived at Raven Rock 5 years earlier with a battered duffel bag and a reputation that preceded him. Former infantry.combat deployments across 2 theaters, transferred into canine operations after pulling a wounded dog out of a kill zone under fire. Ruiz didn't talk much, but he talked to dogs like they were people, and treated people like they needed to earn his respect. His partner was Ajax, a Belgian Malinois built like a weapon. Scar across the muzzle. Eyes that missed nothing. Ruiz used to say Ajax didn't belong to him. "I just keep up with him," he'd joke. Tonight, Ajax sat at the front of the formation. His body was rigid. His ears were forward. His breathing was slow and controlled. He wasn't confused. He was on duty. The official report, already drafted somewhere above Ethan's clearance, would say this: training incident during classified nocturnal operation. Fatal injuries sustained during equipment malfunction. Ethan knew better. He'd been the first officer on scene. Ruiz's helmet lay 6 feet away, uncracked. His rifle was slung properly, safety engaged. His comms unit had been ripped from his vest, and the bruising around his throat, that wasn't a fall. That was a fight. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. Around him, handlers whispered nervously, "Why aren't they moving? They always recall." Ajax hasn't blinked. Chief Hale stepped closer to Ethan. "Lieutenant," Hale said, "this is already going to be complicated. Ethan didn't take his eyes off the dogs. It already is, Chief. Military working dogs were conditioned to obey commands even under fire, gunshots, explosions. Blood. They moved when ordered. That's what made this moment terrifying. 12 dogs, from different litters, different handlers, different training cycles, were displaying the same behavior. Refusal. Not aggression. Not panic. Judgment. Ethan knelt slowly beside Ajax. The dog didn't turn his head. Ethan lowered his voice. "You can stand down, boy," he said softly. Ajax's tail flicked once against the gravel. He stayed seated. Ethan noticed something then. The dogs weren't clustered randomly. They'd formed a loose circle. Every approach angle covered, every blind spot watched. This wasn't grief. This was a guard detail. The black SUV rolled onto the tarmac without lights. Its doors opened in unison. Colonel Richard Brandt stepped out, crisp uniform untouched by the night. His boots were polished, his face unreadable. Brant had never liked the dogs. They were unpredictable, hard to control, too loyal to the wrong people. "What's going on here?" Brant asked. Chief Hale snapped to attention. "Sir, Sergeant Ruiz is down. K-Unit is non-compliant." Brant's eyes flicked to the dogs, then make them compliant. Ethan stood. "Sir," he said, careful but firm. "They're responding to a threat indicator." Brant turned slowly. "Lieutenant Cole," he said, voice smooth. "Are you implying my base is compromised?" "I'm implying," Ethan replied, "that something about Sergeant Ruiz's death doesn't register as accidental. To them." Brant stared at him, long enough for the air to tighten. Then Brant said the word Ethan would never forget. "Their equipment." Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. "No, sir," he said quietly. "They're soldiers." Brant stepped closer. "You are dangerously close to overstepping your authority." Ethan didn't raise his voice. "With respect, sir, authority doesn't change facts." Brant turned to an aide. "Prepare sedation protocols. Remove the animals." The handlers froze. No one moved, not because they couldn't, because they wouldn't. One handler, a young corporal with shaking hands, spoke up. "Sir, Ajax won't let anyone near him." Another added, "None of them will." Brant's jaw tightened. "You will follow orders." Ethan stepped forward. "Sir," he said, "if you sedate them, you'll be sedating 12 combat-trained animals in a confined space. Someone will get hurt." Brant stared at the dogs again. They stared back. Still, silent, unblinking, Brant hesitated. That hesitation, brief as it was, would cost him everything. Minutes stretched. The desert remained silent. Finally, Brant spoke. "Stand down. For now." The relief was immediate, but incomplete. The dogs stayed. They remained with Ruiz until sunrise. Handlers took turns standing watch with them. No one slept, no one joked. Something sacred had been violated, and everyone felt it. Ethan stood beside Ajax as the sky lightened. "You knew," Ethan whispered. Ajax finally looked at him, and in that moment, Ethan understood something that would follow him for the rest of his career. Some truths don't need words. The sun rose over Raven Rock without ceremony. No bugle, no formation, just pale desert light crawling over concrete, wire, and silence. Staff Sergeant Daniel Ruiz's body was removed at 06:43 hours, not with honors, not with ceremony, just a quiet transfer to a sealed transport vehicle, watched by 12 dogs who didn't move until the last inch of canvas disappeared inside the truck. Only then did Ajax stand, slowly, deliberately, as if acknowledging the end of a watch. Lieutenant Ethan Cole felt something twist in his chest. The dogs followed their handlers back to the kennel without resistance. Mission complete. But Ethan knew better. This wasn't over. It had only shifted shape. By 0900 hours, the official narrative was already circulating through encrypted channels. Training mishap during classified operational rehearsal. Mechanical failure. No fault assigned. Ethan read the report twice, then a third time. The language was clean, clinical, carefully empty. There was no mention of Ruiz's missing comms, no reference to the bruising, no explanation for the dog's behavior. Ethan closed the file and stared at the wall. Across the kennel, Ajax sat inside his run, head high, eyes tracking Ethan's every movement. Not anxious, alert, like he was waiting. Ruiz hadn't trusted paperwork, he trusted patterns, and over the last 6 months he'd noticed one forming: dogs reassigned without explanation, training schedules altered last minute, after action reports edited after submission. More troubling, dogs returned from night exercises changed, not injured, different, more aggressive, more stressed, less responsive to standard commands. Ruiz had documented it quietly. Notes scribbled in a battered green notebook he kept locked in his wall locker. He'd shown Ethan once. "Something's off," Ruiz had said. "They're pushing these dogs past doctrine." Ethan had frowned. "Who's they?" Ruiz had shrugged. "That's the problem. I don't know." The truth sat 3 levels below Raven Rock. Literally, sub-level C housed facilities that didn't appear on base schematics. No signage, no windows, no routine access. Ruiz had figured out the dogs were being used for more than training. Live fire simulations. stress inoculation beyond ethical limits, experimental command override tech designed to push obedience past instinct, to make dogs do what humans hesitated to. Ruiz didn't object to danger. He objected to abuse, and worse, he'd discovered that data from these tests was being sold off books to private defense contractors. That made it criminal. That made it lethal knowledge. At 1100 hours, Ethan requested access to Ruiz's locker. It was denied. "Personal effects are under command review," the clerk said without meeting his eyes. That was when Ethan understood. This wasn't about procedure, it was about control. That night, Ethan returned to the kennel alone. He sat outside Ajax's run. "You trusted him," Ethan said softly. Ajax leaned forward until his forehead pressed against the wire. Ethan reached into his pocket and felt it. The small brass key Ruiz had slipped into Ethan's hand 2 weeks earlier. "Just in case," Ruiz had said. Ethan unlocked the locker at 23:30 hours. The notebook was exactly where Ruiz had said it would be, taped behind the lower shelf, wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were dates, times, unit numbers, and one phrase repeated again and again: "Dogs are refusing commands." Not all of them, only some. The ones with stronger bonds. The ones paired with handlers who treated them like partners, not tools. The dogs were resisting the override tech, because loyalty ran deeper than programming. Colonel Richard Brandt believed fear was efficient. He believed silence was loyalty, and he believed young officers like Ethan Cole could be pressured into compliance. He called Ethan into his office the next morning. "You've been asking questions," Brandt said. "I've been reading reports," Ethan replied. Brandt leaned back. "Let this go." Ethan shook his head. "Sir, Sergeant Ruiz died trying to stop something wrong." Brandt's eyes hardened. "You don't know that, I do," Ethan said. "The dogs know it too." Brandt stood. "You will stand down." Ethan didn't move. That was the moment Ethan became a liability. 2 nights later, alarms sounded in sub-level C, not from sensors, from dogs. Every K-unit animal began barking simultaneously, not panic barking. Warning. Handlers rushed in. The dogs pulled toward the lower access corridor, toward the facility that didn't exist. Ethan arrived just in time to see Ajax bare his teeth, not at a person, but at a door. Inside, equipment was being moved, data wiped, evidence erased. Brandt had accelerated the timeline. Ethan stood in the corridor, heart pounding. He had 2 options: follow orders or follow truth. He keyed his radio. "This is Lieutenant Cole," he said. "Lock down sub-level C silence." Then one voice answered, a junior tech, barely audible. "Copy." The doors slammed shut, and for the first time, Raven Rock couldn't hide its secrets. At 0146 hours, Raven Rock locked itself from the inside. Steel doors slammed shut along sub-level C. Red indicators blinked across control panels that hadn't been touched in years. The hum of the base changed pitch, a deeper, angrier sound. Personnel froze mid-motion because no one locked down Raven Rock without authorization. Lieutenant Ethan Cole stood in the corridor, hand still on the radio, heart hammering against his ribs. Sweat trickled down his spine beneath his uniform. He'd crossed the line. There was no stepping back now. Behind him, 12 military working dogs strained at their leashes, not lunging, not barking wildly, but focused. Every one of them facing the sealed blast doors like they were staring down an enemy position. Ajax growled. Low, controlled. That sound alone told Ethan everything he needed to know. Something inside those doors wasn't supposed to leave. Colonel Richard Brandt arrived within minutes. His face was pale, not with fear, but rage. "Open these doors," he demanded. Ethan met his gaze. "Sir, Sublevel C is under temporary containment pending investigation." Brandt laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You don't have the authority. I do under Emergency Animal Unit Protocol," Ethan replied. "Section 9 Alpha." Brandt's eyes flickered. He hadn't expected that. He turned to security, then removed the animals. The words came next. Quiet, devastating. If they resist, neutralize them. Every handler stiffened. Ajax barked once, a warning shot without a bullet. Ethan felt his throat tighten. "You'll have to shoot me first," he said. What Brandt never understood was this. The dogs weren't reacting emotionally. They were reacting logically. Military working dogs processed threat indicators faster than any sensor system Raven Rock possessed. Heart rate spikes, voice stress, chemical changes in sweat. They had been exposed to the override program, and they recognized it now. Inside Sublevel C, technicians were scrambling to wipe drives and dismantle experimental rigs, devices designed to sever handler bond priority in favor of remote command authority. The dogs could smell it, they remembered. And memory, once formed, does not erase quietly. By dawn, Ethan Cole was relieved of command, his weapon was confiscated, his clearance suspended, his future uncertain. He sat alone in a small concrete room, hands resting on a steel table. Across from him sat Commander Laura Hastings, Naval Intelligence Oversight. "You understand," she said calmly, "that you may have compromised national security." Ethan nodded. "I understand that Sergeant Ruiz died trying to stop something illegal." Hastings studied him. "And the dogs?" Ethan met her eyes. "They're the reason the truth didn't disappear. The evidence was undeniable. Video logs of dogs refusing remote commands, biometric stress charts spiking beyond ethical thresholds, financial transfers routed through shell contractors. And one final file, a recording from Ruiz's body cam. Ruiz standing in Sublevel C. Brandt's voice, off-screen, "You will proceed." Ruiz replying, steady, unafraid. "No, sir," a struggle. Then silence. Hastings closed the file. "That's enough," she said quietly. The order came down from higher authority. Suspend the program. Detain Brandt, review K9 unit status. But there was one last decision to be made. The dogs. Some in command argued they were compromised, too independent, too bonded, too difficult to control. One recommendation used the word euthanasia. Ethan heard about it from a sympathetic aide. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he went to the kennel. Ajax stood when he approached. Ethan knelt. "You saved us," he whispered. Ajax licked his hand. Simple, trusting, unquestioning. Ethan stood and walked back into command, and fought. The dogs lived, not because of sympathy, but because the data proved something command couldn't ignore. The bond wasn't a weakness, it was a safeguard. The program was dismantled. Brandt was arrested. Raven Rock changed. So did Ethan. Weeks later, a small ceremony was held. No press, no speeches, just 12 dogs sitting in formation, a plaque bearing Daniel Ruiz's name. Ethan stood behind them, not in command. In respect, Raven Rock didn't explode with consequences. It exhaled. That was how Lieutenant Ethan Cole felt it, like a place that had been holding its breath for years finally letting go, uncertain what came next. Sublevel C was sealed permanently. Concrete poured into corridors, servers removed under armed guard, entire wings erased from operational maps. Official language called it a restructuring. Those who'd lived through it knew better. It was a burial, not of the truth, but of the lie. Ethan was reassigned pending review. No uniform change, no public reprimand, just waiting. Weeks passed. He ran every morning before dawn, past the kennels, past the now silent lower access corridor, past the flag that still rose at 0600 like nothing had happened. Inside the kennel, the dogs had changed too. Not damaged, aware. They obeyed commands. They ran drills. They performed flawlessly, but they watched more closely now. Especially Ajax. Commander Laura Hastings returned for a final interview. "You understand," she said, "that what you did sets a precedent." Ethan nodded. "I understand that silence does too." Hastings studied him for a long moment. "You chose the dogs over your career." Ethan shook his head. "No, I chose soldiers over a lie." Hastings closed her folder. "That's going to cost you." "I know." Raven Rock wasn't alone. Once oversight began pulling threads, similar programs surfaced, some shut down, some quietly rewritten. New doctrine followed. Language changed. Military working dogs were no longer described as force multipliers in certain classified documents. They were labeled what handlers had always known them to be, combat partners. Not everywhere, not loudly, but enough. Staff Sergeant Daniel Ruiz received no headline, no televised funeral. But something else happened. A new policy memo circulated through special operations units. Handler autonomy and animal welfare are integral to operational effectiveness. It carried Ruiz's fingerprints without his name. Ethan stood alone at the small memorial near the kennel one evening. Just a plaque. Just a name. Just 12 paw prints cast in bronze beneath it. Ajax sat beside him. "You were right," Ethan said quietly. Ajax didn't respond. He didn't need to. Ethan was summoned to a review board 3 months later. 3 officers, 1 civilian oversight representative. No accusations, just one question. "Would you do it again?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes." A pause. Then the board chair nodded. "Then we know where to place you." Ethan wasn't promoted. He wasn't punished either. He was reassigned permanently to Canine Operations Development, Training, Ethics, Handler, Dog Integration, the kind of role that didn't make headlines, but changed lives quietly. The dogs remained with him. All 12. 1 year after Ruiz's death, Raven Rock held a closed ceremony. No press, no cameras. 12 dogs sat in perfect formation. Each received a simple ribbon added to their harness. Not for valor, for service beyond command. Ethan stood at attention, not as their officer, as their witness. Later that night, Ethan walked the perimeter alone. The desert wind had returned. The stars were out. Raven Rock looked like any other base again. But Ethan knew better. Some places change forever, not in structure, but in conscience. He stopped by the kennel one last time before heading in. Ajax lifted his head. Ethan smiled. "Good night, soldier." Ajax's tail thumped once against the concrete. The final night at Raven Rock arrived quietly. No alarms, no emergency briefings. Just the sound of boots on concrete and the steady rhythm of routine returning to a place that had nearly lost its soul. Lieutenant Ethan Cole, soon to be lieutenant commander, though he rarely thought about it, stood outside the kennel at 0200 hours. The same hour. Different night. A year had passed since Staff Sergeant Daniel Ruiz fell on the tarmac, and in that time, Raven Rock had become something almost ordinary again. Almost. Inside the kennel, 12 dogs lay alert but relaxed. They no longer slept with one eye open. They had done their job. Ethan keyed his radio. "TAK unit," he said softly. "Recall." Every dog rose. Every dog turned. Every dog moved toward their handler. Perfect compliance. Not because they were forced, because they trusted the one giving the order. Ethan felt his throat tighten. A year earlier, that command had been refused, not in defiance, in judgment. And now the watch was complete. Ethan walked the same stretch of tarmac where Ruiz had died. There was no mark left, no stain, just clean concrete under desert stars, but Ethan could still see it. Ruiz standing his ground, Ajax seated in front of him, 12 dogs forming a silent shield. Ethan stopped and removed his cap. "Your watch is over," he said quietly. The wind carried the words away, but not before they mattered. Ruiz lived on in the small things, in revised training manuals, in new handler selection standards, in the way young officers were taught to listen, to animals, to subordinates, to their own instincts. Most of all, Ruiz lived on in the dogs. They were calmer now, steadier, as if the burden they'd carried had finally been acknowledged. The final act came without ceremony. Each dog was reassigned, some to active duty, some to training units, 2 to medical retirement. Ajax stayed. Not because he couldn't serve elsewhere, but because Ethan requested him, and because no one argued. That bond was no longer seen as a liability. It was recognized as leadership. Ethan was offered command of a new unit, higher rank, more authority, distance from the kennel. He declined. Instead, he stayed where he could make the most difference, where silence was broken early, where loyalty was respected, not feared. At sunrise, Ethan stood with Ajax at the edge of the base. The flag rose. The day began. Ajax sat at his side, not on command, but by choice. Ethan rested a hand on the dog's shoulder. "Good work," he said. Ajax leaned into the touch. Some orders are meant to be followed. Others are meant to be questioned. True discipline isn't blind obedience. It's the courage to stand still when the world tells you to walk away. Loyalty is not weakness. It is the quiet force that guards what matters most, long after the fighting stops. And sometimes, the bravest soldiers never speak at all.